The shrimp was still twitching on the platter. Not literally, but that's how raw it looked. I stared at it for maybe a full minute, pretending I was deciding whether to take one. Truth is, I wasn't thinking about shrimp. I was thinking about whether anyone would notice if I just slipped out the fire exit, Ubered home, and said I had food poisoning. Because I already felt sick, but it had nothing to do with seafood. A few feet behind me, under the shimmer of a gold chandelier, my wife was laughing in a way she hadn't laughed at home in months. Not the polite kind of laugh you give to your uncle at Thanksgiving. The real kind. The one that comes from somewhere lower in the body, familiar, intimate, like an inside joke that's been seasoned over time. And it wasn't directed at me. I didn't need to look. I already knew the posture. The lean in. The touch to the elbow. The tilted head. I'd seen it before, once, a long time ago, when she was still falling in love with me. I tried not to turn around. I really, truly tried. But I did. And there it was, framed like a movie scene I'd never want to watch again. Her, in a navy satin dress that I hadn't even known she owned, her back arched slightly, her lips parted in a smile that didn't belong to me anymore. And the man? He looked like he knew how to ruin a marriage without breaking a sweat. Their bodies moved like magnets pretending to be casual. Then, the kiss. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't heated. It was soft, gentle, familiar. My stomach dropped so hard I actually heard my knees creak. I took a step forward, just as she opened her eyes mid-kiss and saw me, full eye contact, like an accidental collision in a hallway. Her lips were still brushing his. For a moment, no one moved. The music swelled behind us. Someone popped a champagne bottle. I think someone laughed, but all of it was muffled. The only sound I heard was her voice, quiet, barely audible over the noise. Don't do anything stupid. Not I'm sorry. Not it's not what you think. Not even Emery. Wait. Just that. A warning. Like I was the problem. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, trying to connect her face to the woman who once spent an entire Sunday crying over a puppy adoption ad. She walked toward me slowly, leaving the man behind her like a coat she no longer needed. Let's go outside, she said softly, like we were at a dinner party and I was making a scene about the dessert being too cold. I followed. Not because I wanted to. Not because I had anything to say. But because my body had decided moving was safer than standing still. Outside, under the soft orange glow of the courtyard lights, she folded her arms and looked at me like I owed her an explanation. I didn't plan for you to come tonight, she said. I told your name to the list because I felt bad leaving you out. I didn't think you'd actually show. I blinked. The words didn't even process at first. My brain just locked on that one phrase. I didn't think you'd actually show. Like my presence was the mistake. Like her lie only mattered because I had the nerve to see it. I wanted to scream, or cry, or throw something into the decorative fountain behind us. But all I did was whisper. Who is he? She looked down at her heels, then at the sky, then at anything but me. You don't want to know. But I did. And I will. And what I found out later. It made this moment feel like a paper cut before the knife. I didn't sleep that night. After we left the party, and I use the word we very loosely, I rode home in silence beside Brenna while she tapped at her phone the whole drive. She didn't apologize. Didn't explain. Just sat there glowing in the cold blue light of her screen like nothing happened. I watched the notifications flash across her lock screen. Names I didn't recognize. Little heart emojis. A "can you talk?" bubble from someone named Alec that made me bite my tongue so hard I tasted copper. The moment we stepped into the apartment, she tossed her clutch on the table, slipped off her heels, and headed straight for the bathroom. The sound of the faucet running was the only proof she was still in the same space as me. I stood in the living room, jacket still on, trying to make sense of the past few hours. My mind kept replaying it in loops. The kiss, her expression when she saw me, and those 5 words, don't do anything stupid. Like I was some unstable wild card. Like I had betrayed her. She finally emerged, wiping her face with a hand towel like she'd just finished a long workout and not detonated our entire marriage. I thought maybe now she'd talk. Maybe now the weight of it would hit her, and she'd fall into my arms crying, confessing, regretting, begging. Instead, she glanced at me like I was standing in front of the TV. If you're going to sleep out here, just don't leave your charger in the wall again. You keep burning it out. That was it. That's the sentence that did it. Not the kiss. Not the betrayal. But that casual flick of the wrist. That exhausted roommate tone. Like we were splitting rent, not sharing a life. I stood there in complete disbelief. The pain in my chest wasn't sharp. It was dull. Slow. like someone had left the oven on low and forgotten I was inside. I think I said her name, maybe just a whisper. Maybe I imagined it. But she was already turning away, walking into the bedroom, pulling the door shut behind her with a quiet little click. I didn't move for 20 minutes. Eventually, I sat on the couch, fully dressed, and stared at the dark TV screen until my reflection blurred. I looked like a man who'd lost something but wasn't sure when it had slipped away. I couldn't cry. I wanted to, but the tears were stuck behind a wall of disbelief. This woman, the same woman who used to write me notes on sticky pads and leave them in my lunch, had kissed another man in front of me and told me not to be dramatic. And I still loved her. That's the worst part. I still loved her. At around 2:15 a.m., the bedroom door creaked. I turned my head, hoping maybe she'd come to say something. Maybe she'd finally break. But instead, she walked right past me in leggings and a hoodie, grabbed a LaCroix from the fridge, and sat at the counter scrolling on her phone. I couldn't take it anymore. Was that him? I asked, my voice hoarse and pathetic even to my own ears. The guy from the party. Is that Alec? She didn't look up. She just shrugged. You don't want to get into this tonight. I'm already in it, I said, standing slowly. You dragged me in when you kissed him. She exhaled, finally looking at me like I'd just farted in church. It wasn't like that. It was a mistake. A moment. It's complicated. It didn't look complicated. Her expression twisted into something between frustration and boredom. You're blowing it out of proportion, Emery. This is why I didn't want you there. Everything has to be a meltdown. I nearly laughed. Meltdown? I hadn't even raised my voice. I hadn't done anything but exist, and that alone seemed to inconvenience her. She stood up and walked past me again, and as she did, I caught something. Not a smell, not a sound, a vibe. Something in the way she moved. Careless. Distant. Like someone who had already decided which version of the story she was going to tell her friends, and it wasn't going to paint me as the victim. And I realized something right then. This wasn't new. That kiss. It wasn't the start of anything. It was the reveal. I had been living in the second act of a play I didn't even know was happening. And the audience? Everyone at that party. Everyone but me. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, heart aching, while she lay in the next room, dreaming, maybe, of someone else's future. But mine had just begun to unravel. The sun rose like nothing had happened. It poured into our apartment through those sheer curtains Brenna insisted we hang, because light feels more honest in the mornings. I stared at that sunlight, wondering if she even remembered saying that. I wondered if she remembered all the things we used to say to each other when the world felt simple. Back when we still left notes on the fridge and laughed under covers about made-up inside jokes no one else would ever understand. Now there was only silence and a wall between us. Literally and emotionally. At around 7:30, I heard her shower running. She always started her mornings with the same routine. 8 minutes of hot water, Spotify's Fresh and Fierce playlist, and zero awareness of anyone else's existence. I stayed on the couch, still dressed in my wrinkled shirt from the party, still half curled under a throw blanket that smelled faintly like lavender and regret. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to speak. But I also didn't want to not speak, because every minute that passed without her saying something made me feel like I mattered even less. She emerged from the hallway with her hair towel-wrapped like a crown and her phone already in hand. She didn't look at me as she passed. Not once. She just walked to the kitchen and started her morning like I wasn't even there. I cleared my throat. Loudly. She flinched slightly, as if remembering I existed. Then turned with a tight smile, the kind people give their boss when they're asked to work through lunch. Morning, she said flatly, opening the fridge. Brenna, I began, voice already trembling. We need to talk about last night. She sighed. Not the kind of sigh that comes from guilt, the kind that says you're making my day harder than it needs to be. Look, Emery, I really can't do this right now. I've got 2 meetings, a pitch due by noon, and I'm already behind. You kissed another man, Brenna. I snapped, louder than I meant to. I think your pitch can wait 5 minutes. She finally turned. Do you want honesty, or do you want me to lie and make you feel better? That sentence hit like ice water. My jaw tightened, and for a moment, I honestly didn't know what to say. I want the truth, I whispered. She nodded slowly, as if she'd been waiting for me to say that. Then she leaned against the counter and looked me dead in the eye. Fine. You want the truth? I've been unhappy for a long time. You're sweet, Emery. You're thoughtful. You're safe. But I feel like I'm suffocating. You tiptoe around life like you're afraid to touch it. I need someone who makes me feel alive, not protected. The words were so sharp, so specific, I wondered how long she'd been rehearsing them. I blinked back, the sting in my eyes. So what? You just started cheating on me? She scoffed. It wasn't cheating. It wasn't planned. It was connection. Something that doesn't require a monthly budget meeting and a reminder to buy toilet paper. I was stunned. This wasn't a slip-up. This was contempt, dressed in confidence and rationalized with poetry. She didn't regret the kiss. She regretted that I saw it. I stood slowly, still dizzy from the blow. How long has this been going on? She looked away. That was all the answer I needed. My knees nearly gave out. I sat back down, trying to breathe, trying to feel something that wasn't total humiliation. I could barely speak, but I forced it out anyway. Was it him? Alec. She gave a half-smile. I'm not naming names. And just like that, I knew it wasn't a one-time mistake. I was the fallback plan, the background character in her movie, the husband who watered her plants and paid her subscriptions while she found herself in someone else's arms. She turned to leave, heels clicking softly against the tile. Just before reaching the door, she paused, then looked over her shoulder like she was about to toss me a scrap of humanity. Take the day. Think things through. Just don't burn the place down emotionally, okay? And she left, like I was some pet who'd be fine with enough food and a pat on the head. I sat there for hours. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened her laptop. I didn't want to, but I needed to. And what I found changed everything I thought I knew about the past year of our life. I didn't open the laptop to snoop. That's what I keep telling myself. It wasn't about violating privacy or seeking revenge. It was survival. When someone drops a truth like that on you and walks out the door, you're not looking for closure, you're looking for air. And when you can't breathe, you do whatever it takes to find oxygen. Even if that means logging into the digital shadow of the woman you just realized you don't know anymore. Brenna never logged out of her email. She never thought I would check, not because she trusted me, but because she didn't even see me anymore. That's the thing about people like her. They think invisibility equals obedience. But I wasn't being obedient. I was being erased. So I opened the lid, watched the screen flicker awake, and there it was. Her inbox. Hundreds of unread messages from vendors, clients, team leads. And nestled in the middle of all that noise, a thread labeled simply, Thursday night, from Alec. I clicked. The thread was short, casual, but loud in its implications. Alec, still on for Thursday? My place. Same wine. Same dress. Brenna, of course. You think I'm missing that again? Besides, Emery thinks I'm at yoga. Yoga. I laughed. A sad, painful laugh that cracked halfway through. Because I remembered Thursday. I'd even picked her up after the supposed class. She was sweaty, sure. But I'd noticed the perfume, musky, floral, not the usual light citrus she wore to the gym. And the way she leaned over and kissed my cheek instead of my lips. I thought it was just a mood. Now I knew it was residue. I kept scrolling, hands trembling. There were more messages. Photos. Not explicit, but emotional. Smiling selfies. A shot of the two of them holding hands under a restaurant table. A video clip of Brenna in his kitchen, dancing barefoot with a glass of red wine while he laughed in the background. But what gutted me the most wasn't the romance. It was how comfortable she looked. Relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. Like she'd stopped auditioning for life and just started living. With him. Not me. I closed the email app. My stomach twisted. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room. Or delete every trace of him from her life. But what would that fix? It wouldn't erase the look on her face when she told me I made her feel like she was suffocating. That wasn't Alec's fault. That was mine. Or at least that's what my brain told me in its weakest voice, the same one that always reminded me to be patient, forgiving, soft. But the thing is, soft things get stepped on. And I'd just been flattened. I opened her calendar next. I don't even know why. Curiosity? Hope that maybe this was a weird phase and not a full escape plan? What I saw chilled me. Blocked out on next month's calendar, 2 weeks in blue, marked only as retreat. Location, Tuscany. Tuscany. I had to reread it 3 times. I scrolled up, checked the event details. She'd forwarded it from her personal email. Not work. It was a reservation confirmation. 2 names on the booking, Brenna Caulfield and Alec R. Langston. Same last name as the man who kissed her in that ballroom. But here's the thing, it wasn't booked under a getaway package or something casual. The file attachment said, Client Profile, Honeymoon Premium Upgrade. Honeymoon. I blinked, staring, unable to process what that could possibly mean. They weren't married. She was still married to me. So why? That's when the next shock hit. A second email. A draft saved in her inbox. Unsent. Addressed to me. Subject line. I'm sorry it had to be this way. I opened it. Emery. I want you to know this isn't easy. You've been good to me, truly. You've shown me a kind of love that most women would be lucky to have. But I've changed. I've grown. And in the process, I realized I was growing in a different direction than you. I didn't want to hurt you, but I also couldn't keep lying. Alec and I have something that feels real, whole, honest. I know that's hard to read. I know it probably feels like betrayal. I'll be gone for a while. Please don't make this harder. You'll be okay without me. You always were stronger than you believed. Brenna. I stared at that last line. You always were stronger than you believed. The cruelty of it was unreal. It was like being handed a sympathy card after being hit by a car, by the driver who never looked back. I sat in our living room, staring into nothing, while the apartment filled with the smell of her shampoo from the towel she'd left draped over the chair. My mouth was dry. My heart wasn't even beating fast, just slow and heavy, like it was dragging my body down through the floorboards. And that's when something inside me changed. Not anger, not revenge, but awareness. She was leaving. She'd already chosen. I was just the last one to find out. But I still had time to choose how I'd leave this story. And I had one card left to play, one she hadn't seen coming. I didn't sleep that night either. That made 2 in a row. But this time, it wasn't grief keeping me up. It wasn't even betrayal. It was clarity. A very strange thing happens when you realize someone is preparing to erase you from their life, piece by piece, carefully, surgically. You stop worrying about what they'll take and start thinking about what you can still take back. Brenna was planning an escape. She'd written the goodbye. She'd booked the trip. She'd chosen her future. I was just a sentence she hadn't sent yet. And if she thought I was going to stand still while she disappeared into a Tuscan honeymoon with her real connection, she didn't know me at all, or maybe she just thought I was too soft to ever fight back. But here's the thing about soft men. If you push them far enough, they bend quietly, until they suddenly don't. I waited until the apartment was empty the next morning. She left early, like nothing had happened. No mention of the night before, no acknowledgement of the laptop, no, I love you. Just a closed door and a whiff of vanilla perfume that clung to the air long after she was gone. I knew her schedule. She wouldn't be home until late. That gave me hours. First, I opened the storage closet. We hadn't touched most of the boxes in there since we moved in. I pulled out the old file bin we used for tax documents and paperwork, and there it was. Our marriage license, her birth certificate, old bank account details from before we merged everything. I took pictures of everything important and uploaded them to a secure drive she didn't know existed. Next, I opened the shared bank account on my laptop. She'd been slowly bleeding money out for weeks, transferring small amounts to her personal account, careful not to trigger alerts. She thought I wasn't paying attention. She was right. I hadn't been, but I was now. And I noticed something. She had opened a new account under a different name. Not completely different. Just enough that someone at the bank wouldn't notice unless they looked closely. Brenna Langston. I wasn't supposed to see that yet. That name. That future. She had already started becoming someone else, and I was the only loose end left untied. That's when I knew what I had to do. I called the bank. Froze the joint account. Not out of spite. Out of survival. She wasn't entitled to clean me out just because she'd emotionally clocked out. I had paid the rent for 10 months straight while she shopped for new cookware and convinced herself it was personal growth. I had the right to protect myself, even if it felt unnatural to take up space for once. Then I went to the closet, packed a duffel bag, just essentials. A couple shirts, my toothbrush, the dog-eared book I never finished, and the hoodie she used to steal when she was cold. I stared at it for a long time before throwing it in. It didn't smell like her anymore. Nothing did. I left her a note. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't cruel. It was just the truth, boiled down to one sentence. You wanted me to disappear. Now you'll know what that actually feels like. Then I walked out. No drama. No yelling. No threats. Just the quiet sound of the lock clicking behind me. I checked into a motel on the edge of town. Somewhere cheap, anonymous. I needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out what came next. The room smelled like old cigarettes and desperation, which matched my mood perfectly. But for the first time in days, I wasn't surrounded by her world. I was in mine, whatever pieces of it were left. That afternoon, I got a text. It was from Brenna. Did you move money from our account? A few minutes later, another. Where are you? Then, finally. Don't be dramatic, Emery. Just come home so we can talk. I didn't reply. She didn't want to talk. She wanted to control the narrative. That had always been her power, to make the betrayal sound reasonable, to make my pain look like pettiness. But she hadn't planned for this. She hadn't planned for me to leave before she had the chance to shove me out. And as the sun went down behind the cracked blinds of my motel room, I realized something deeply uncomfortable, something I hadn't wanted to admit for years. I had always been waiting for her to love me back the same way. And now that I was gone, she might finally notice what loving me had actually meant. By the second night in the motel, she still hadn't stopped texting. The notifications came in waves. First were the short, sharp messages. Where are you? What is this? Answer me, Emery. Then they morphed into guilt-laced attempts at control. You're being immature. This isn't how adults handle things. You're ruining everything. And finally, as the silence stretched longer, the tone began to shift. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Please talk to me. Can we just meet for coffee? I didn't reply. Not once. Because with every ping of my phone, I realized something Brenna never had to confront. Silence speaks louder than any apology. And mine was screaming. I spent most of that day in the motel room, curled up in a chair that felt like it had absorbed 30 years of other people's mistakes. I ordered greasy takeout and stared at the TV without watching it. I opened our old wedding album on my phone. Yeah, I know, pathetic, right? But I needed to remember that I wasn't crazy, that we had been happy, that she did love me once, or at least pretended well enough that I believed it. There was one photo that hit me hardest. It was her in the back seat of our rented car, shoes off, her legs curled under her, head on my shoulder, looking up at me like I was the entire world. She didn't know I was taking it. She was smiling in that unconscious way people do when they're safe, when they trust you completely. And now here we were. Trust in ashes. Safety shattered. But even then, even with all the pain, there was a tiny part of me, the weakest, most pathetic part, that still wanted her to come clean. To show up at that motel door crying, to say she'd made a mistake, to drop the walls and tell me the truth before it was too late. That part of me got obliterated the moment I checked our shared email later that night. It was a simple auto-notification. A password reset for her airline rewards account. She was still going. Tuscany. 2 weeks. First class. Only the name on the reservation had changed again. Now it was under Mrs. Brenna Langston. She was using his last name to claim the booking, just like that. Like I never existed. Like our entire life together had been some placeholder while she waited for the real thing. The nerve. The absolute audacity. While I was crumbling in a budget motel, she was fine-tuning her fantasy life with a man who probably didn't even know how I liked my coffee, or how I once drove 3 hours through a snowstorm just to bring her a scarf she forgot at her mom's. The next morning, I woke to find something even more disturbing. A voicemail. I never listened to voicemails. I hate the sound of my own name said by people who've already made up their mind about me. But this one came from an unfamiliar number, and curiosity beat out dread. I pressed play. It was Alec. His voice was polished, controlled, too clean. The kind of voice that sells you a car and then sells your story to someone else when you crash it. Hey, Emery. This is awkward, I know. But I think we need to talk man to man. I didn't know you'd find out this way. Honestly, I assumed things between you and Brenna were already over. I'm not trying to step on anything. I just want to move forward with her in peace. I'm sure you get that. She told me you were always reasonable. So if you could stop freezing accounts and walking away from conversations, I think we can all avoid making this uglier than it needs to be. He ended the call with a smug little thanks in advance. Like this was a business deal. Like I was a speed bump on his route to domestic bliss. And that was the final click. He wasn't just confident because she told him I was gone. He was confident because she made it easy to erase me. So I decided to return the favor. I left the motel before noon. I didn't go home. I didn't call her. I went to a lawyer. Yeah, it cost more than I had planned to spend. Yeah, I had to ask my brother for help covering the retainer. And yes, it felt like signing a permission slip to watch my life burn. But for once, I wasn't reacting. I was acting. The lawyer listened quietly as I told her everything. I didn't hold back. Not about the emails. Not about the reservation. Not about the new identity my wife had built while still wearing the old one around our apartment. She nodded calmly, took notes, and then slid a packet across the table. It was a preliminary draft of a separation agreement, one I could serve without speaking a single word to Brenna. One that gave me time, privacy, and most importantly, control. I signed it without shaking. And when I walked out of that office, I realized something I'd never expected to feel so soon: relief. Not happiness. Not revenge. Just the soft, quiet breath of a man who finally remembered what it felt like to choose himself. But what happened after I filed? I never, not in a million years, expected her to show up where she did, or to do what she did next. 3 days after I filed the papers, I got a text that stopped me cold. It wasn't from Brenna. It wasn't from Alec. It was from my building's doorman. "Hey, Mr. C, you all right? Your wife came by earlier. Said she lost her key. I didn't let her in, but she waited in the lobby for almost an hour." I stared at the message, trying to imagine her sitting in that chair next to the fake ficus plant, tapping her phone, probably rolling her eyes every 5 minutes. Why now? What had changed? Did she finally read the bank notifications? Did Alec's voicemail never get the reaction he wanted? Did she think she could just waltz back in and convince me it had all been a misunderstanding? Part of me, the weakest part, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was there to apologize. But I knew better, and I proved it by staying right where I was. That night, I didn't go back. I stayed at my brother's place. He wasn't thrilled to have me sleeping on his pull-out couch, but he understood. He'd never liked Brenna. Said she was too career-polished and always talked to me like I was an intern she regretted hiring. I thought he was just being protective. But now, I could see it. She never actually talked to me. She directed me, managed me, spoke like I was a puzzle to be solved, not a partner to love. The next morning, I got a new email. Subject line: "This isn't like you." It was from Brenna. "Emery, I'm trying to understand what this is. You freeze accounts, disappear, ignore my messages, and then I find out you filed for separation without even speaking to me? I mean, really? After everything? This isn't like you. You're not this person. You're not impulsive or spiteful. You talk. You process. You're the guy who cried it up and apologized for stepping on a beetle. Where did that person go? Look, I know things got messy. I know I made some choices that hurt you. But you're reacting like I committed murder. It was a kiss. Maybe a few kisses. Maybe more. But none of it was worth ending everything. Alec is complicated. But that doesn't mean we have to throw our history away. I don't know what he told you. I don't even know what you think you know. But you're walking away from something real. Just meet me. 1 hour. 1 coffee. Let's not end it like this." I read it 3 times. The part that stuck with me most wasn't the denial or the deflection. It was a kiss. Maybe a few kisses. Maybe more. Maybe more? So she was still hedging her bets. Still controlling the narrative. Still trying to plant doubt in me, like I'd misread all of it, like the photos, the messages, the honeymoon plan with his last name were somehow a miscommunication. And yet, I almost replied. I nearly tapped out a shaky response that said, "Fine, let's talk." But then something happened that made everything clear. I got a call from an unknown number. I don't normally answer those, but I was holding my phone anyway, and curiosity got the better of me. "Hello." There was a pause. Then a woman's voice, older, trembling but firm. "Is this Emery Caulfield?" "Yes," I said slowly. "Who's this?" "This is Lynn Langston. Alec's wife." "Wife?" The room spun. I sat down hard. She continued. "I wasn't sure whether to call. I found your number from an old invoice Brenna emailed him. I know about them. I know what they've been doing. I thought I was crazy for a while, but I've known for months. I didn't know you were involved. Not like this." My throat went dry. "You're still married to him?" "Legally, yes. Emotionally? I think I stopped being his wife the day he met yours." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, slow and heavy. "I don't want anything from you, Emery. I just thought you should know you're not alone. You're not crazy. And you're not the only one they lied to." I thanked her genuinely and hung up. The silence after that call was the heaviest silence I've ever sat in. I realized I had spent weeks drowning in shame, confusion, guilt, wondering what I did wrong, while the two of them orchestrated a fantasy life like puppeteers pulling strings behind everyone's back. Alec hadn't rescued Brenna from a lifeless marriage. He dragged her into his own. And she went willingly. She played house with him while calling me dramatic. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a network of lies. It was a performance. And I was done being in the audience. So I wrote one last message. "Brenna, thank you for the clarity. I didn't respond before because I wanted to make sure I understood what I was walking away from. Now I do. We're done. Emery." No punctuation. No warmth. Just closure. What she did next. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't rage. It was something so desperate, so unexpected, it caught even me off guard. And it happened in front of someone I never thought would see me break. I didn't expect her to come to my brother's house. Especially not 2 days after I'd sent that final message. By then, I thought we were done, not just on paper, but spiritually, emotionally, cosmically. I thought the universe had drawn a thick black line between us and stamped finalized across our story. But the thing about people like Brenna is, they don't like being shut out. They want to be the one who gets the last word. The one who walks away first. She knocked at 7:43 p.m. My brother was at work. I was sitting on the couch in his hoodie, eating stale crackers and watching a rerun of some game show I didn't care about. The knock wasn't urgent. It wasn't gentle either. Just 3 calculated taps, like she already knew I was on the other side of the door and didn't need to knock harder. I opened it because I was curious. That's all. Not because I wanted her back. Not because I hoped for a miracle. She stood there in her power blazer, hair up, makeup fresh, like she'd just come from a TED Talk. But her eyes looked tired. Like someone who hadn't slept since the truth started unraveling. I read your message, she said. I said nothing. I just needed you to know. I didn't expect you to walk away like that. I thought you'd fight for it. I almost laughed. You thought I'd fight to stay in a place I wasn't welcome? She lowered her head, like the answer embarrassed her more than the question. I was wrong, she said. About everything. Alec. Us. What I thought I needed. You were never the problem, Emery. I was just too selfish to see what I had. And too much of a coward to end things honestly. There it was. The admission. It didn't feel triumphant. It didn't fix anything. But it helped me breathe. I'm not here to win you back, she continued, voice shaking slightly. I know that's not possible. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Truly. Not for the cheating. Not just for the lying. But for making you feel like you weren't enough. Because you were. You always were. I let that sit in the air for a long time. Then I nodded. Thank you for saying it. I needed to hear it. She smiled, not a happy smile. A sad, small, respectful one. Then she walked away. No drama. No bargaining. Just a woman finally facing her own wreckage. And me? I didn't cry. I didn't spiral. I didn't even feel broken anymore. Because in that moment, I knew the version of me that needed her validation didn't exist anymore. In the weeks that followed, I moved into a small apartment of my own. Nothing fancy. But it was mine. I got a cat. Something she'd always said she was allergic to. Turns out she wasn't allergic. She just didn't like cats. I went back to my old hobby of restoring antique radios. Joined a book club. Started journaling, even if it still feels awkward to write without purpose. And one day, without warning, I met someone. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't magnetic or polished or the center of every room. But she asked how my day was and actually listened. She laughed when I mentioned I cried during Pixar movies. She told me her biggest fear was dying without finishing her novel. I told her mine used to be not being enough. Now, it's wasting time trying to be what someone else needs instead of being who I already am. And maybe that's the most unexpected ending of all. I didn't win her back. I found myself instead. And honestly, that's the happiest ending I could have asked for.